All righty. Betsy, you were first, so let's just get started so we don't run out of time. Our lovely friend here is just gonna, we have this is for the video to record you, and this is for people to actually hear you.
Wonderful.
So, there you are.
All right, so we were talking about the need for, thank you, that would be great, Indigenous languages in hospitals and clinics. So we have a lot that we talked about, but most of our takeaways were how do we make it accessible? How do we get payment for our interpreters? How do we get them qualified instead of certified by the state, as we were talking with the ASL qualification versus certification? How do we make sure that we stay within best practices for our patients? And just the experience that they have with their providers. A lot of the thing that we talked about was appointments are so short. We have 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and they have to go on to the next. And most of the time, we don't have the time to ask if they understood, if they know what they need to do. And it's even worse in hospitals because most of the time it's critical condition or things that need to be very fast paced, and there's no way to separate interpret and they show it for understanding. Yeah, so there's just a big lack of interpreters. We talked about trying to form a local coalition, kind of like the group that came from Oregon, in fact, in November. So how do we do that? Is this some ideas? We can work on that. And how do we keep our interpreters safe? There's a lot of people that could interpret, but their legal status doesn't allow them to work. So what do we do to make it accessible for them and people that need the interpretation, and how do we protect those, but also allow them to get payment for that? And yeah, and that kind of listening thing.
Awesome, thank you. Just come right in.
I'll put some here. Okay. Hello, my name is Deborah, and I was at table 4 where we were discussing language access plans and best practice. So we started off, Amy shared her wonderful expertise and knowledge in helping organizations create language access plans. And so first and foremost, legal requirements are usually less than the level of best practice. So it's important to go above and beyond what is legally required of us. And so best practices exist to help us fulfill our requirements to provide services, and some steps and considerations we can take while developing language access plans. One, identify the need. So what are your language access needs across your organization? What do your clients, patients, patrons, etc. need in terms of language access? And something Amy shared is when we're identifying the need, it's important that the identification of that need follows the person, the client, patron, etc. So when that person is engaging with your organization, they are not constantly reestablishing their need for language access. Document the need. Choose your modality. There are different ways that we can provide interpretation. Is it written communication? Are we doing it via app, in-person interpretation, etc.? Regarding in-person interpretation, it's important to think about interpreter etiquette. So a mistake that's often made is the interpreter is speaking to a service provider as opposed to the client, patient, patron, etc. So we, at our table, we got a question of, okay, so how often are these language access services being used? For the city, we provide interpretation at our city council meetings. How often is that actually needed or used? And Amy shared that it's important for us to know that the use of those language access services follows the establishment of the access, right? Oftentimes people aren't coming to our organizations and saying, hey, we need these services, but once we have them in place, then we have more and more people using them, accessing them, because we are now a more accessible organization. It's important to take into consideration your signage. Is your signage accessible in multiple languages? Is your website accessible in multiple languages? Lizbeth shared it's also very important to not advertise a level of language access that you cannot sustain or actually provide. When it comes to language access in your organizations, training is a key in part of that. So ensuring that training is part of employee onboarding. And then last but not least, at our table, we discussed how, oftentimes in Whatcom County, when we're talking about language access and creating a more accessible county as a whole, we get really kind of wrapped up in the technicalities. And if we're not perfect, we don't want to do it. And so a key lesson we ended on is do not allow perfection to become the enemy of good.
Awesome.
Wait.
Oh, yes, this thing.
Sorry, I just want to grab it.
No,
Thank you. All right, so this is double. This one's for the video.
Okay, thank you.
And I will hold this for you. And come a little closer so that you're in screen. Okay, there you go.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nikki D'Onofrio. I manage a project to improve access to the civil legal system for survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence. And we have a special focus on language access. So I led a discussion about language access in the courts and justice system beyond violence beyond gender-based violence, but inclusive of it. So some things that we talked about were lack of signs in the courthouse in multiple languages, limited qualifications of available interpreters, and that includes situational and vocabulary. So for example, in my focus, knowing the language of violence, knowing language of sex acts, knowing the slang that people might use in many different dialects. And comfort with that and comfort using those words to be able to interpret in court and outside of court. We also talked about the lack of access to legal assistance regarding immigration issues is huge, and as well as including lack of language access in immigration services that are available. Lack of data, knowing what the need is, but that's only part of the story, because the people who are accessing the courts, people might self-select out of accessing civil legal services if they don't feel like that might be available to them. And I think a theme of today that I'm taking away is for a potential solution is having a long-term vision for building an effective workforce of interpreters is really needed across disciplines. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you. If anyone who's been on screen today can make sure they grab one of the little forms where people sign their release on the tables, and maybe I'm on it, and Joseph, you can pick up some of those and just get them to the people who you've seen up here today, that would be awesome. All right, Nathan. You have to kind of come like right in here tight to be on the video, the right spot.
Put anything on the paper because we forgot to write stuff.
I will. I'll hold it for you.
Okay. Oh, I dropped it. Okay, this has been difficult. I don't know how to operate this thing.
Shall we do it?
Yeah, just
Okay.
sorry.
No, it's okay. There you go.
Hello. I was at table. That table over there, table 1. And so we were talking about what things can we do when there's organizations, whether it's healthcare, school, any type of organization that has a legal obligation to provide interpreter services, but they're not doing it. And we know that the law doesn't have any teeth. Like, you can't just say, oh, well, that's against the law. Like, it's not going to cause people to start providing the services. So what are things that we can do? And so we did lots and lots of brainstorming of ideas of what we can do, and we forgot to write anything on the paper. But some of the things that we were talking about is like that even though you file a complaint with like the state and like the healthcare authority and they never send you anything back, if they start getting lots and lots and lots of complaints about like, and this would be for healthcare, about like a specific clinic or a specific hospital or a specific like hospital system, that is going to lead to the potential for an investigation. The other thing is that more documentation like that, it should any group in the future want to do like a class action lawsuit, if there's lots and lots of documentation of all of the complaints that have gone in, that would be potentially helpful. So that was some of the stuff that we were talking about. And then we were also talking about how the complaints with the healthcare authority and with the Office of Civil Rights, you don't have to have the consent of the patient. So like, if you're working with a patient and then like you find out through the appointment that like they weren't having interpreters at like, you know, their kids' therapy place, and you know, later on you're thinking about that and you're like, wow, that's really, like, you don't have to go contact them and be like, oh, you need to sign this release. Like, you can fill out the stuff and say, this is what I know of the situation, and it will still go into the system. Obviously, it would be best if like you can do it with somebody, but that's not always possible. But it's still good to record all of these things that are happening in our community when we find out about them, so that they can, because if they get like, if like a hospital gets like one call, it might not mean anything, but if they're like, yeah, in the last month we've had like 50 people like say that they didn't get interpreter services, like, you got to step it up. That might actually lead to change. So that's what we talked about, and thank you very much.
Do you remember?
I do.
You can just like stick it on there, maybe.
You have a double microphone?
Yeah, that's for the video. This is for the people to hear you. And if you just come a little closer, they might see you too. Yeah.
Hey everybody, I'm Bartsley, is a Sheeper pronoun, so with the Mass TV Center. I was at group table 2. We were talking about, spelling as a communication for nonverbal autistic individuals. And we rooted in communication as a human right and explored the understanding that helping individuals communicate what's happening inside, and there's a lot of different ways to do that. There are some ways that are approved, and there are some ways that are not, that have been discredited in the system. And so how do we make sure that we're prioritizing the individual who deserves to be heard and to speak, no matter what, that what is the path of least resistance, and how can we build a system, a structure here in Whatcom County so that this interpretation, it is interpretive skills, right? Like this is exactly what it is, and we just observed that there were some practices that are acceptable when interpreting it for some folks, yet for folks who are nonverbal autistic, there's a different standard to what is allowed. And so just kind of challenging that. And ultimately, the small group, we all exchanged information, and we're just going to continue having conversations about what this would look like in our community. Some short story. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, I don't have to hold it. Think your video, are you in it? Yep, you got it.
Hi, I'm Amy Moline, again, from the Opportunity Council, the Assistant Director of Birth Free. We were in number 6, which was creating an incremental action plan for language access in the face of state budget shortfalls and catastrophic federal actions/inactions. So that's like a really big topic. And it kind of shows in our notes. So we started by just sort of introducing ourselves and talking a little bit about what all of our major concerns were. And it was everything from how do we keep initiatives going after one-time funding is exhausted? What do we do when we're losing certifications for long-time interpreters? Where do we begin? Sharing resources, understanding the role and the skills needed to be a language access coordinator or language access advocate. How do we help achieve institutional buy-in? Who can we partner with in the community? What are the common needs and issues? And what are court processes and access to trained interpreters, especially around specialized and sensitive topics? We didn't answer any of those questions because they're big. And then we sort of talked a little bit about some of the advocacy organizations that are out there doing the work already. So we talked a little bit about, and I'm probably gonna say it wrong again, Chila. Did I get okay? Kind of close? Yeah, Chela? I'm learning. So it's the first day I've learned about it. The Kaiser Family Fund, the National Health Law, and then Families USA. Those were a few that were shared. And then we just sort of waxed on about some of the challenges that the Medicaid budgets are facing right now, the cuts towards Medicaid, especially around interpreter and translator access, and then the challenges that we have accessing those services to begin with. So, you know, the answer is not cut a broken program, it's fund it so we can fix it. So there was some talk around how do we organize as a community, how do we focus our energies on the state of Washington to kind of fill some of those gaps and to start supporting advocacy to our state lawmakers and then our federal lawmakers to help heal some of those programs and fund those programs. Early stages, but we're hoping that some continued communication around these topics can lead to some real change and collaboration.
Hi everybody, again, my name is Sara and I'm the Language Access Coordinator for Opportunity Council. So we talk about the importance of keeping Indigenous language alive, which was kind of interesting. We were kind of, I started complaining, I'm sorry, because we were talking about the language of less in the future. However, we were only 3 in our table. So we were like, okay, well, we still can talk about it. And how kind of we start addressing all these issues, you know, like why we're not have enough interpreters that they speak indigenous language, and we come up with some ideas like how can we improve these, like for example studying a language, studying a culture, connecting with communities, networking, you know, finding support from different maybe high schools that they seniors that they wanna be interpreters and translators, or talk to people from the university that they speak different languages and encourage them to maybe pursue the career of translation and interpretation. I think we have to understand that translation and interpretation is a fairly new career. This has been widely spread in the last maybe 10 years. Before that, we were only using volunteers, we were using kids, we were using a staff that happened to learn you know, Spanish, for example, when they were 5-year-old. So right now, we are encouraging to be more professional everywhere and try to use professional interpreters with some education. That way we can respect our client, we can respect our public. Another you know, possibility that we come out, another idea is also offer possibilities for education and provide tools like scholarship, connection, finding funding, you know, all these things that they're gonna help us encourage people to pursue this career. Creating, you know, I mentioned creating partnership with universities, with local groups and things like that. And also, I think it's very important to celebrate the culture of the people that speak indigenous language. We are in an indigenous town, or indigenous land, so therefore, celebrate the culture is very important. Thank you very much.
All right. Okay, so we were part of group 3 and we talked about engaging with ICE and CBP. So ICE is Immigration Customs Enforcement, CBP is Customs and Border Protection, and our concerns around mass deportation. So often when ICE and CBP are first coming in, interpreters are going to be there in the live space, right? You're going to be with the patients or clients, when they're waiting room, when in the lab, whether it's in the treatment room. So we just talked about some of the pieces that interpreters should kind of be aware of. The first, Alicia had pointed out before, but knowing how to define public versus private areas is going to be super important. And the reason why it's important is because when ICE and CBP come, they're going to give you different types of warrants, and some warrants allow them to come into private areas, and some only allow them to access public areas. So we talked a little bit through some of those types. The other thing that I really want to highlight for folks is, have folks seen these red cards? Okay, I see some nods. So red cards are really awesome because on one side, it gives you what an individual rights are. On the other side, it gives a paragraph that someone could just hand to an ICBP agent that basically says that, I do not wish to speak with you. I have these amendment rights. I do not want to sign anything. These are my amendment rights. So we've been encouraging folks to get these. They're very in high demand, so it's hard to get them. But there is a website that provides this in 15 languages, so it is very accessible. And there's another website through the Asian American. Thank you so much. That also provides additional languages as well. And then the final thing we talked about is the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network has a rapid response hotline. If you don't know what that number is, highly encourage it. When ICE and CBP is near your facility as a CBO, as a provider, you should call that number because they have a rapid response team that then documents and then tracks where ICE and CBP activity is happening in Washington state. So I think the role of the interpreter is going to be pretty critical, especially because sometimes you're going to be directly face-to-face with ICE and CBP. So wanting to know what our rights are and then making sure that you know that you could provide materials to your clients or folks that you're working with as well. Yes, it is the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network's hotline, and the number is 844-724-3737. Oh, yes. I also have a couple of handouts that are in that middle table. One is guidelines on how to prepare for CBOs. So there's 2 forms. Another is how to prepare and guidelines for clinics. And then the last one is types of warrants. So make sure to grab that as well because it provides sample warrants. And then the Wisen hotline is on those pages as well. All right.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you mind just handing this to the film guy in the back there, Cole? All right, wonderful. Andreas, we're about to close here, so if you want to go over to Cole and get mic'd up, that would be awesome. So we have a little closing for you today, and then you'll have a little time to network. We don't want to run into that networking time more than we already have, but we do want to take a few minutes at our tables to reflect together. We also have a survey about the convenings. We're trying to decide, do you all want us to do more? If you want us to do more, what should they be about? Like, this is a community. Who wants to help lead them? Who wants to help organize them? It's a big piece of work that we've all been doing, and we'd love to have other people get involved in that work with us. And at the moment, this is the last one we have planned. We're considering something in the fall, but we would love to hear from you about that and about if we continue and it becomes, say, an annual thing, what does that look like? So you can do this survey later, but right now we want you to talk at your tables, and Andreas will tell you more about what we want you to talk about.